Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin, check. You already know. Let's go. Golden Blooded is a college football YouTube channel for entertainment. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into our next college football video. Don't forget to send gear to represent your team. The address is P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. Yeah. Shout out to the winners of our bowl prediction contest. We had a three-way tie for third place. In third place, we had Alan Aaron, we had Matthew Skidmore, and we had Charlie Wood. And for second place, we also had a two-way tie, so there will be two people that will get a signed Golden Blooded flat bill hat. First one is LSU number 1 2019 DJB, and the second one is Jason Rollinson. But of course, the first place spot and winner of $50, firefighter1218@gmail.com. We're at that time of the year where the national championship is done and over with. The college football season has just concluded. People start to lose interest in college football content. So it's kind of hard to keep people interested. So what I like to do at this part of the year is actually look at my comments. Sometimes I see some very interesting comments and I do videos on those comments. This is going to be one of those videos. This is actually about a couple of comments. I thought these comments were very interesting, so I decided to do a video on it. The first one is from Roman Morani. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Here's what this comment says. The only teams that meet Ohio State's criteria would be UNC, FSU, and maybe Miami. Virginia and VT, no way. They are in a pro football market, and it would be a Rutgers Redux thinking you were going to capture the NYC market. I kind of understand what you're saying there with the Virginia and Virginia Tech thing, but at the same time, Virginia Tech has a strong following whenever it comes to college football. They're kind of farther away from that Washington, D.C. TV market than what you realize. But I understand what you're saying. I would agree with Virginia more than Virginia Tech, but Virginia does have AAU status, and that does appeal to the Big Ten. And on top of that, with the Rutgers market, no, you're not actually capturing the New York City market as far as massive viewership, but you are capturing a lot of revenue because the revenue per TV set is much higher in the New York City market and the New Jersey market in particular. So yes, the Big Ten did gain a lot of revenue from Rutgers. Yes, Rutgers is the main draw when it comes to college football or college athletics in general when it comes to the New York City market. But I understand what you're saying. What was really interesting was the top of that. The only teams that meet Ohio State's criteria would be UNC, Florida State, and maybe Miami. So yesterday I actually did a video on why Washington, Oregon, well, maybe the reason why they didn't get accepted. And this was a comment on that video. And it's basically because of Ohio State. Ohio State said, no, we don't need any more. And I know it takes a vote, and it's the presidents of the universities that take that vote. But it came down to Ohio State when you boil it down to its foundation. So he's saying that only North Carolina, Florida State, and maybe Miami meet their criteria. I would disagree with that because there's actually several teams in the ACC that have AAU status, and that's a big criteria for the Big Ten, therefore Ohio State's criteria. First team is Pitt, but I don't think Pitt would be even considered by the Big Ten because they already have the state of Pennsylvania and Penn State. Pitt wouldn't add that much viewership. Duke, I think, checks the boxes, not big time, but they have great academics. It would be a new state footprint for the Big Ten, and that would stretch them a little further south. Of course, Virginia has AAU status. That captures you a new state footprint as well. I like Virginia Tech just a little bit better than Virginia, but Virginia Tech doesn't have AAU status. That is a big deal. Georgia Tech. I actually think Georgia Tech is a bigger draw for the Big Ten than people realize. Yes, they have AAU status. Yes, it would be a new state footprint, but on top of that, that is a footprint in downtown metro Atlanta, a hotbed for recruiting. They would be capturing a major recruiting hotbed. And finally, North Carolina, the last team in the ACC with AAU status. Of course, they check all the boxes. New state footprint, AAU status, massive fan base, would draw in a lot of revenue for the Big Ten. As far as Miami, well, Miami doesn't have AAU status, but I do think that the Big Ten would be interested in Miami if they did get AAU status. Same with Virginia Tech. And from what I'm hearing, Virginia Tech is very close to getting AAU status. They have over $500 million in research revenue, so they're getting really close. Now, the Florida State comment, I really don't agree with that because Florida State does not have AAU status. They wouldn't even be considered for the Big Ten. Florida State would be a lock to go into the SEC. Same with Clemson. Clemson doesn't have AAU status. Clemson would also be a lock for the SEC. Otherwise, if Clemson and Florida State both had AAU status, yes, the Big Ten would most certainly fight to get both of those teams in the Big Ten and try to keep them out of the SEC. Remember, whenever you're getting a big brand, not only are you helping your own conference because you're gaining that big brand, but you're hurting your competition because you're keeping that big brand from going to your competition. So yes, if those two schools had AAU status, they would be more than interested in trying to get them. And we might see a conference war over Clemson and Florida State, but they don't have AAU status. So I don't see a conference war happening over those two teams. Those two teams would go to the SEC for sure. Another comment that I saw in the comment section for that video that I really like. This is from Mike B. It says, great video, GMBD. I appreciate that. Multiple rumors are leaking after Kevin Warren's tenure. Oregon and Washington seem to be opposed by OSU, Iowa, and future members UCLA and USC. I haven't thought of that. What if UCLA and USC were like, yeah, we want to come to the Big Ten, but only if you don't accept Oregon and Washington. Maybe they are blackballing Oregon and Washington out of the Big Ten forever. Like, it's not happening because that was one of the conditions of the contract between USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten. I haven't thought about that one, and it does make sense. I mean, that would be a dirty, petty move by UCLA and USC, but I mean, these are the times that we live in, folks. He goes on to say, more interestingly, we are learning that the Irish were a non-starter for Michigan, Wisconsin, the Illinois schools, talking about Illinois, Northwestern, Iowa, and Nebraska. No more teams in the Big Ten until the next contract. That includes the Irish. And the Big Ten is working on a long TV deal with Fox. So if that's true, that means Notre Dame wouldn't be able to join the Big Ten for a very long time. Not saying that Notre Dame wants to join the Big Ten, because I've heard from a lot of Notre Dame sources that Notre Dame wants to remain independent forever. But that's an interesting rumor or fact, or whatever you want to call it, that Notre Dame wouldn't be able to join the Big Ten even if they wanted to for a very long time. Finally, the last part of this comment that I wanted to address, the Big Ten wants into the state of Florida, and of course would take A&M or Texas and Oklahoma. I have touched on briefly how Texas A&M could leave the SEC for the Big Ten simply because they don't want to be in the same conference as Texas. That is the reason why they left the Big 12 in the first place. That and a lot of money, of course, but Texas was a big time reason why Texas A&M left the Big 12 and joined the SEC. And it's the same reason why the SEC kept it from Texas A&M until the very last minute. They did not want Texas A&M throwing a big old fit because they were inviting Texas and Oklahoma. So I've touched on that, how Texas A&M could leave the SEC for the Big Ten. They have AAU status. They check all the boxes. And yes, the Big Ten does want a solid footprint in the state of Texas. That would make a lot of sense. I think there's a much higher probability of Texas A&M jumping from the SEC to the Big Ten rather than Texas jumping from the SEC to the Big Ten. I think Texas wants to be in the SEC. Texas A&M does want to be in the SEC, but the reason why they left the Big 12 is now coming to the SEC. So they would have a bigger reason to leave the SEC for the Big Ten over Texas. So if the Big Ten has any shot of getting a school in the state of Texas, it would be Texas A&M, but I don't think there's any chance whatsoever, 0.00000% chance of the Big Ten ever getting Texas or Oklahoma. But I do think there's a small percentage, a small chance that the Big Ten eventually could get Texas A&M because they just don't want to be in the same conference as Texas. Now, I don't think that would happen in the near future, maybe after this next TV deal and the next wave of conference realignment happens, then they could jump ship. They like the money that they're making in the SEC, and yes, they would make a ton of money in the Big Ten. But another thing to consider is there are no exit fees for the SEC. So if they wanted to, Texas A&M could jump from the SEC to the Big Ten and there would be no penalty. So there's something to think about as well. The only team in the state of Florida that has AAU status is Florida. So the only chance that the Big Ten would have as far as getting a footprint in the state of Florida would be if the Miami Hurricanes got AAU status. That's why that's important to mention that Miami is pursuing AAU status. Once that happens, I think their value, according to the Big Ten, skyrockets. I think it goes through the roof. I think they turn into a must-get for the Big Ten if they can get AAU status. That's how important it is for Miami to get AAU status for them to get into the Big Ten, because the Big Ten would most definitely want Miami. However, if they can't get AAU status, then their fallback would be the Big 12. They would already have a travel partner with UCF. It wouldn't be a bad fit for Miami to go to the Big 12. I think the Big 12 could grab Pitt, Syracuse, Louisville, and Miami. Maybe Virginia Tech if Virginia Tech can't get AAU status, which would be amazing for the Big 12. So y'all let me know in the comments section. Number 1, do you think Texas A&M will ever jump from the SEC to the Big 10 because of Texas? Number 2, do you think the Big 10 will ever get that footprint in the state of Florida because of Miami potentially getting AAU status? Number 3, do you think Notre Dame will ever join the Big 10? And number 4, do you agree that Duke, Virginia, Georgia Tech, and North Carolina all check the boxes as far as Big 10 membership? I think those are the 4 schools we're looking at headed to the Big 10 once the ACC dissolves, unless Virginia Tech can get AAU status. That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.